Dr. Richard Carrier, I really appreciate your time.
And I appreciate your scotch.
Exactly. I got another Patreon question. Thank you, Malin, for becoming a patron of MythVision. I really appreciate you helping build an empire that brings serious scholarship from a variety of voices to the public. I want the world to understand and to learn. And I think we'd live in a better place.
Right, yeah.
And having scholars like you.
That's the profound value of your channel. The scholars you've gotten to interview is just amazing. And I don't see anyone else really succeeding at this and doing it. So it's super valuable. And I know the scholars value it as well. That's why they come on the show. So they get the opportunity to get their ideas out to the public. And a lot of scholars really, that's what they do this for, right? So yeah.
I'll tell you my secret. It's two things. And this is honest, but not everybody can do it. There's a humbleness in when I say a humbleness you have to carry, I mean a student mentality. You have to remain a student no matter if you think you're right. You might even think, I got the answer. It's that saying. There's a wise saying in the Bible where it says, like, I heard their case, but then the other man came and he made that one sound stupid or something. Like,
I can't remember the
it's
line,
a proverb or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so true because I'll be like, mythicism is just ridiculous. At some point you hear enough of these and then all of a sudden you get to like hearing you and it's like, it's really not as ridiculous as I thought. I mean, I may still be convinced of something, but it's like, so anyway, I just say that to say it's a humbleness of being a student. And then the second thing is being able to allow various ideas without don't get too attached. Because first of all, I don't have any dog.
Right. Yeah, and really the scholars that you interview, like most of them are like legit PhD scholars who've got actual peer-reviewed publications. And these are people that the public normally doesn't get to hear. And so I find channels like yours valuable in that respect. So thank you.
Thank you. No, I appreciate your time. You came here, you're in my office. We're doing courses. Be on the lookout for that as well. Mm-hmm. And we have a question.
Yeah.
Malin, I think I'm saying it. Mallen. Thank you for being a super chat, or a Patreon, not super chat. I'm reading Amy Jill Levine's book, Short Stories by Jesus. It seems like the Gospels neglect text from the parables when providing their meanings. The relentless widow being about prayer is one example. Do you agree or disagree? Where would you say the parables are from? Thanks. The Gospels neglect.
Well, if I take the last part of that question, where do the parables come from? Right, that's a question to ask, right? Because if you look at Paul, the letters of Paul, which are the earliest documents we have in Christianity, there are no parables. He never quotes a parable and never mentions parables as a method of teaching. Now, it's possible that maybe the parables were passing around and Paul just never used one. That seems unlikely, right? So there's a classic example is his teaching on taxes, where Jesus does the thing about the thing of Caesar, which is kind of like a parable, the way he talks about it. That would be gold for Paul to have quoted in Romans 13 on the issue of paying taxes. But he has no knowledge of it existing. He has no knowledge of Jesus ever teaching anything about that at all. So I think, and then you combine that fact, so put that on the shelf as one thing. And then the other thing is you start looking at a lot of these parables, especially as they develop through the Gospels. Like, Luke adds parables that aren't in Matthew and Mark, right? When you start looking at that and you start realizing that these parables are very convenient to the messaging of these particular authors. So it sounds like they're inventing the parables, right? So put that on the shelf as well. And when you put those two things together, it looks like Jesus probably did not teach in parables. But parables was a common mode of teaching. Like rabbis taught this way. So this was a thing. It isn't unique, right? And so when we get to the Gospels and the parables, I think the Gospel authors themselves are inventing these parables. I don't think they're getting them from oral lore. I think they are coming up with clever ways to tell this. Now, parables are a sort of Jewish way of doing what Greeks called krei, which is telling a story that has a meaning that you want to convey, right? So they're fictional stories. And this, when you went to Greek school in Antiquity, and you got to a high enough level, which was composition, when you got to the point where you're being taught to compose stories, so in other words, you're being taught to be an author and do what the gospel authors did. Once you're at that level, you're taught to actually invent stories to convey values and meanings and stuff like this. And they call them krei, and they have a different kind of structure, but they're very similar to parables in the way that they use teaching, right? So you tell a fictional story, but it's the moral of the story that's the important thing, right? So this is what Greek schools are teaching you to do. Now, Jewish rabbis are doing parables in the exact same way, right? So this is a Jewish rabbinical tradition. They have their own schools. So if you're someone who's gone to both schools, you're going to start composing parables using the Jewish tradition and merging it with the Hellenistic tradition that you taught, or that you were taught once you're doing it Greek. And I think that's why the Gospels, you see all these parables popping up in the Gospels, is that this is what they were taught in school as the way that you formulate teachings. And so they're just putting them in the mouth of Jesus because these are things they want Jesus to have said. In some cases, they might even capture things Jesus did say, right? So if Jesus did exist and gave certain teachings, he might not have done it in parable form, but by the time the teaching gets to a gospel writer, the gospel writer wants to jazz it up. And so he has Jesus teach it in a parable form to make him sound like other rabbis and things. So all of these things are possible. And you really have to get down to the question of specific parables. Where did this parable come from? And a lot of the time your answer is going to be, we don't know. And this is the biggest problem with it, is people want certainty. They want to know. Most ancient history, especially in New Testament history, because so much evidence has been destroyed and so much evidence has been meddled with, we often just don't know the answer to these questions. And I think most of the time it's 50-50, whether it was Jesus taught in these parables or the authors of the Gospels invented them. So I think that's where the parables come from. But it is a well-known teaching method, and it was a method of teaching that was taught specifically in schools of the time. So there's nothing unusual about it. And I think it's interesting to look at the cleverness of the construction of these stories, regardless of who the authors of them are.
Well put, well put. And another part, I'm not sure if this has been addressed so far, she says, it seems like the Gospels neglect text from the parables when providing their meaning. And then says the relentless widow being about prayer is one example. I wish there was more detail she gave what she means by that.
I would
or what he means, I'm sorry.
I would need to pull up the text to get what she's getting at, or he's getting at.
I wonder if it's Amy Jill Levine this point in the I just haven't looked at it.
Yeah, this is a work of Levine. I like Levine's work, but this is a work I haven't read, so I don't know exactly what she said about this particular thing. So I really can't answer it. I have
heard, I'll give you one example. I don't know if this is relevant, but I'm trying to make it relevant because absolutely. I have heard when I did the course with James Tabor on Mark, he said that a lot of these parables Jesus gives, like, nobody understands, and Jesus doesn't even explain what they mean.
No, most of the time the explanation isn't there. I think their questioner is asking about cases where there's an explanation shown and they're missing elements of the parable, right? So like I said, I can't think of an example in my head clear enough to answer the question. I'd have to have an example text in front of me. So this question just isn't complete enough for me to answer.
Right.
But it is an interesting question, though. So I would like to see a good example shown to me so that I can actually dig into it and figure out if there is an answer to this question, or if someone's already covered this, right?
Right.
Or reading Levine's work as an example.
Well, just one funny note on that part I was bringing up about how Mark does this. I think there's something to it. He said Jesus spoke in parables in this gospel so that people wouldn't understand.
Yeah.
Like you would think here's a parable, so it's a secret way of teaching a lesson. Yeah. But he does it so they don't get the damn...
It's meant for insiders to be given insider knowledge. It's very much like the Freemasons, right? Like there's doctrines that you're taught, or Scientology where there's secret doctrines that you're taught. And so that's the way the mystery cults work generally. That's how Christianity worked in the beginning. So there's a lot of these, there's secret meanings to these parables that only insiders are given. And part of this has the same effect that it has on Scientologists and Masons and so on, is that you get this feeling that, oh, you know something that everybody else doesn't. This makes you special, and your membership in this group now means something, right? So you have access to the deeper meaning of these parables. And of course, when John Dominic Crossan talks about stories about Jesus themselves being parables, these are parables featuring Jesus as the character, then it starts to make more sense, because you look at the story, and I mentioned this, we're just filming courses on the mythology of the Gospels. And one of the examples is the catch of 153 fish, right? And so this is narrated in John as an actual thing that happened. It's not a parable that Jesus tells. But it is written like a parable, and it is probably a parable. It's intentionally, there's some sort of mystical meaning. Why 153 fish? There's a meaning there, and only insiders are supposed to be told what that meaning is, right, or whatever. So, and that makes you feel special when you're an insider who gets that knowledge. And the outsiders, and that's how you tell the difference between insiders and outsiders, is whether you get it or not. So that's a problem. And whether that explains, whether that answers the question as to why if there's examples of gospel authors not giving explanations of parables that leave parts of the parables out, I don't know. I'd have to see a specific example, the text right in front of me, and look at it before I can answer that.
Well put. Thank you so much for being a patron of MythVision. Go support us. Be on the lookout for the courses. Everything's in the description, and there you have it. Thank you.